from FightHype.com. I'm here with the man, Steven Espinoza. How's it going?
Good, brother. How are you?
Doing great. First and foremost, congrats on landing such a monumental landmark of a fight in boxing on Showtime.
It's, look, it was a lot of work. It was one of the more difficult and complex negotiations I've been involved in, maybe behind second only to Mayweather-Pacquiao.
Wow.
But it was, it's worth every minute. When you get to this point in fight week and you can really start to feel the buzz, you start to see the tangible indicators of what's going to happen, whether it's the live gate or the pay-per-view pre-buys or all the media turnout. Like now it's very much real, and it's very much worth all the time and effort spent over the last 6 months.
I just couldn't help, but I just heard you said the second toughest behind and that we all know the Mayweather-Pacquiao thing was just
miserable.
But it's also the biggest all time, so it makes sense different. But why was this number 2 compared to all the big complex fights you guys worked with?
Well, I think you had a lot of obstacles. You had 2 promotional groups that weren't really. Don't have a history of working together and had been antagonistic at various points. Golden Boy, PBC, and TGB. You had 2 rivals on the business end, Showtime and DAZN. You had 2 fighters that had a lot of animosity, toward each other, and you've got contractual and legal restrictions in terms of fighters that are exclusive to specific networks. So that's a lot to work out. We all know that just the fight deals themselves can be a stumbling block, but then you add on 2 or 3 more things on top of that, then it just makes it, not twice as hard, it's like 10 times harder with each obstacle that you add on top of it.
So with that, obviously you got the 2 promotions that have to work out, they have to be satisfied, but then the networks, I'm assuming with the DAZN and Showtime, well, just that alone, like you guys sound like you guys made a really good situation for both. They'll be able to, you guys distribute it through DAZN, you guys broadcast it, and it's the American, so what was that? I know that could be like something like we want it here, but why was it able for them to be satisfied with that? And then obviously you guys.
I think it took a while, but you get to the point where you have to start looking at beyond your just position. Of course we wanted the whole thing. Of course they wanted the whole thing. But if that's where we were going to end up, then there was nothing to talk about because that wasn't going to happen one way or the other. So then the process is, okay, what's really important to you? This is what's important to me. What's important to you? What's a deal breaker to you? And, that takes some time to come out and define for yourself and for the other person to lay out what they want. And so, look, is it the perfect deal? No. There's some things that we're not crazy about. Of course. There's some things that they're not crazy about. And there's a lot of complicated. I think it's clear enough to people what happens with sort of where you sell it, how you buy it, that kind of thing. But there's a whole lot of other things about how you market it and how you make sure that you're not stepping on each other's toes. The last thing we want to do is, for example, something as simple as search marketing. And people don't know the way it works. It's an auction system. So it's like you want to buy Google search results, you offer a certain number and, you get it. Well, if they want to buy, Davis versus Garcia pay-per-view as a Google search,
wow.
We can bid each other up if we're both trying to be the number one.
Yeah.
So that just, it's not the end of the world, but there's a whole bunch of things where we could have made it a lot more expensive, a lot more difficult for each other if we were really trying to fully compete. So there's a lot of areas about, what is the language of the market? It's not fair to, say this is a Showtime, on Showtime pay-per-view. It's not fair to say it's on DAZN pay-per-view. When do you say both? How do you refer people where to buy? How do they tell people where to buy? How do we tell people? There's a whole range of stuff that relates to the marketing and the messaging where you don't want to confuse people and you want to be fair, but you also want each company to have their own opportunity to drive business.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense. There's a lot of fans just look at networks and things but when you bring up the Google search, it goes a lot deeper. And I know you guys are doing a lot of the social media thing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have been going through their TikToks and those things. And it's been very prevalent in that it's Is that something that you guys did to do that, or is just the algorithm?
No, it's. I think I said in some interviews at the start of this promotion, it was the first social media promotion, and what I meant by that was not that this is the first time social media has been used. I mean, you can go back to the Mayweather days, and Mayweather used social media as well as anybody in the sport has ever done. So this has always been part of it. But this has been, I think, the first promotion where it was the primary outlet. And that's because of where media and technology is today. But mainly because of where these two fighters are. These are two fighters who organically have built up their fan bases on social media. That's where they engage their social media. Their fan bases, the age demos of their fan bases are such that they're far more on social media than they are anywhere else. So, going into this and saying we're going to advertise this on TV, on ESPN, on NBA games, that wouldn't be that effective. Not for this demo, not to capture all the people who are fans of them. So this is sort of like sometimes you have to go fish where the fish are. And here the fish are, the audience is on social media. So that's where the majority of our efforts went to.
And then my final question on that particular topic is there's obviously going to probably be a huge expectation, because you got two of the biggest, if not probably this is the biggest boxing event of the year when it comes to revenue, and that's what everyone's projecting. Is there a really high, I guess, cover cost, because do you have a high expectation, and do you feel like you can blow that expectation out of water, or?
I think that's part of the, part of the science and the art. It's not exactly a science, it's more an art of trying to balance out. I mean, obviously, we want to make a fair deal to the fighters and something that approximates it, but we can't go so far out on the ledge where, all of us are going to get, hurt in doing business. Mm-hmm. So, to answer your question, it's not like, hey, we had to go out and, guarantee $50 million.
Different than the Mayweather Pacquiao.
Yeah,
versus...
it wasn't that, because look, it's no secret that that piracy has really affected the pay-per-view market. Some people say it's 30%, some people say it's 40%. There's definitely some big chunk of sales that we're losing from people not buying the fights. And candidly, this is a side issue, and that's why sometimes it is harder to make fights, because it's way more difficult, there's less revenue on the table, and it's more unpredictable. So I think that's one of the problems with Spence Crawford, is sort of figuring out what's a reasonable deal given what the market will bear, what piracy will bear, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So in this case, yeah, I think it's a deal that is fair to everybody. I mean, the reality, these guys are still relatively young. It's not that, they've been making $50 million a fight going forward. That makes it a little bit easier. I think we've got a fair deal, and now that we're here in Fight Week, I think it's turned out to be even bigger than we had hoped it would be. And I think it's clear to say that each of them is going to be making a career high payday, probably by a factor of 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna rip the band-aids. You said it, Spence Crawford, and I know you've been...
No, it's fine.
But just like, at a certain point, and speaking just from a boxing fan perspective, obviously you mentioned the most difficult, and now you mentioned the second. Could this potentially beat number 2? If not, I don't think
difficulty?
Yes, I don't think number one was very right. But is this how? I don't know. I don't want to ask these redundant questions how close and how far, and but
it's been difficult, but really the difficulty in Spence Crawford has been in sort of how do you construct the deal with the fighters that everyone thinks is fair, because I think that's been the fundamental disagreement here. It's not networks, it's not promoters, there's none of those obstacles in place. So it's really about what do the respective fighters, how do they value themselves, what do they think is a fair deal, and there's just been a genuine disagreement about how they both view what the deal is worth, and that's not something that you can sort of talk your way into. At a certain point, people have to believe they're getting a fair deal, or they're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. So, there are other issues beyond the deal, but that's been the major challenge. So, look, it hasn't been as complicated as some of the more difficult ones. It's been long and sort of grueling, but we are definitely close. We're closer now than we were at our closest point last fall. And I'm optimistic. You know, there was a point where discussions had completely stopped, but they picked up the last couple months and are making progress and slow progress. Now, I don't want to be too confident and too excited, because the reality is we were very, very close last fall and it fell apart.
Yeah.
Now we're even closer now.
Than
It could still-
than
than we were in the fall.
Okay.
Now, could it still fall apart? Sure. You know, I'm a big proponent of saying, look, the deal's not done until it's done. And so when we get there, then when it's signed, it'll be done. Now, I'm optimistic. I think we will get a deal. Now, I'm also, go back, I thought we would get a deal last fall, so I'm certainly not infallible. But I am optimistic. I don't think there'll be anything announced this weekend.
Okay, well, they just say it out there. There's no...
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's no plans to do it right now.
Okay.
Just like, you know, June 17th was never a date for Spence Crawford. Like, it never was. I think people want this fight so badly, and I understand why. I want it too. But you start trying to connect dots that aren't dots to be connected. You know, TGB and PBC had a date on hold June 17th. And people start saying, well, you know, they've got it on hold in Texas and in Vegas, so it must be for Spence Crawford.
Right, the process on
And then it spread like wildfire. No, it was never June 17th. It's not going to be June 17th. Will it be this summer or early fall? You know, if we get it done, I think so. And I think it's more likely than not that we do get it done. It's just we're not done yet.
And my final question on that topic, and I appreciate, you know, just as a network, because, you know, you spoke about, you know, making the Ryan fight. There's a lot of other things that, you know, you play a factor in. But when it comes to two fighters, how much can a network actually be, you know, in influence on kind of constructing that fight and making it happen? Because, you know, obviously there's one promoter, you know, and this Crawford's a free agent. So what component can, you know, you and Showtime be able to affect and make that better?
You know, we play a different role in a lot of in different negotiations. You know, here sometimes it's sort of mediating between two promoters. You know, and that was part of Mayweather Pacquiao, is balancing out the two promoters. Now, on this particular event, you know, that's not our role. Our role is, you know, to the extent that we can help the fighters understand the deal, if we can provide, you know, a different point of reference, you know, a different explanation, you know, maybe more assurances, you know, coming in and saying, okay, you know, you may not believe or want to believe this promoter saying this, you know, here's our experience and here's the numbers to back it up. So it's whatever's necessary to make the fighters comfortable, you know, and to, you know, to really give them full information about what's happening. We've got a lot of experience. I mean,
Kind of like an advisory role?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no one who's done more pay-per-views over the last 10 years than us. You know, and when you look at the top pay-per-views in the market, you know, we've done all of them. So the reality is no one's more experienced, nobody knows more about the pay-per-view business than us. So if someone comes in and has questions about, you know, how does it work and what's the structure and what's an appropriate deal, what's a fair deal, like, you know, we can be very helpful, and I think we have been helpful.